25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Wednesday morning. John Fuller is in the studio. He is an attorney at the law firm of Fuller and Fuller. He being one of those two. I'm not sure if he's first or second. The other Fuller is Shannon Fuller, his wife, and he does this radio show every week to answer questions that you might have about the law. And the number to call in today is the same as always, the WOCA Climate Control Source Hotline, 352-622-9622. Good morning, John. How you doing?
Good morning, Larry. It's nice to be back live with you. We've had a couple of weeks where, unfortunately, I had conflicts, and so did Janet, so we were having to do reruns of previous shows.
Yeah.
Hopefully there was something of interest in there to our listeners that they were able to pick up in case they may have missed the particular show. But we are back live, and we invite our listeners to call in. Janet and I do practice law here in Ocala, and we have offices in the villages. We handle business and commercial litigation and personal injury, accident injury cases, and Janet specializes in Social Security disability law. We also do a specialized, limited, complex family law practice where we take a few major family law cases each year, most of them involving business commercial law issues that we litigate in that area also. So if our listeners have a case, if they've been in an accident and been injured, have suffered damages, if they have a business commercial dispute, or if they're unable to work and they feel like they might qualify for Social Security disability benefits, or they've applied and been denied for Social Security disability benefits, happy for you to call our office. We'll be glad to talk with you. The office number is 352-547-4292. We have a toll-free number, 855-534-2565. Law firm of Fuller and Fuller. We have offices here in Ocala and also in the villages. In fact, Janet has a full day of seeing new clients in the villages who have Social Security disability questions and claims. So if you're in that area and you are unable to work and you've been treated medically, certainly don't hesitate to give us a call. The purpose of this show, and we enjoy it, we have some wonderful, magnificent listeners who call in with very, very good questions, good discussions, is to talk about how the law generally affects our lives and in general terms a legal issue. Certainly, as we've said many times in the law, the legal question is very, very fact specific, and the devil's in the details. So we're not able to give specific advice over a call-in show like this. But if we can help you or direct you in the right area, we're always glad to do that. I think too many people have misperceptions about our court system. We have two court systems in the state court level, the county court, which deals with misdemeanor criminal offenses, traffic infractions, and civil disputes that are of a limited amount of money in controversy. Circuit court is the trial court level at the state level that deals with felony cases and more complex civil disputes that involve disputes in excess of $15,000. That's at the state court level. Then we have our federal courts, which are a different jurisdiction and a different set of laws completely. So it's easy to get confused, and before someone just doesn't know, I always recommend a consultation with a lawyer is usually a good thing to do.
I want to ask you about, I guess, an unusual type of an automobile accident. It's the automobile accident where there was really no accident, no collision anyway. A car is about to be hit by another car merging into its lane, doesn't see him in the blind spot, drives off to the shoulder to avoid that collision. The car that caused the problem is oblivious to it, keeps going. The one that hits the shoulder hits the grass, spins, doesn't get hurt, doesn't flip, nothing, but the people in it get shook up a lot, physically. Okay. to the point where they're literally injured. They've got injuries from in the car.
Yeah.
Now, there's not a dent in the car. There's not any damage to anything other than inside the car they were shaken up. The two questions is, one is, does the auto insurance, the insurance that they've been paying for all this time, help them out with any medical needs that might have caused?
Yes, that's a very good question, and those cases are well recognized in the law. There's a lot of appellate decisions on it. They're known as the phantom vehicle type case, and it's when you are driving and a vehicle does something that causes you to react, whether you run into a tree on the side of the road, or you flip your car, or you spin out like you said, and the vehicle that caused that by either pulling in front of you or swerving in front of you, stopping suddenly and causing you to lose control trying to avoid an accident, and then that driver drives off and leaves you there, and there is no other car. You don't know who they are. Your insurance on your automobile, first of all, you must report it. Secondly, you want to make certain you call law enforcement and have an investigation.
Oh, okay.
Because even though there may not be physical damage to your vehicle per se, there will be signs of physical evidence of what happened. Skid marks.
True.
Scuff marks from tires going sideways.
Yeah.
Disrupted sod on the side of the road. Gravel, rocks, debris. That is there and should be observed, should be photographed. Certainly, with the proliferation of everyone having a cell phone with a camera on it now, take pictures of it. Again, we've talked about the rather draconian changes that the legislature made in the PIP law that went into effect. Part of it in October and part of it in January of this year. You want to immediately go seek medical attention. Remember, you have to go to a medical doctor, an osteopathic physician, a nurse practitioner, or a physician's assistant. You cannot go to a chiropractor as the initial treating medical provider. You should make certain that they document that it is a significant medical event if you have major injuries, and you must go to the doctor within 14 days, maybe 15 days. I've got it on a chart at the office, but within 14 days to be safe. And those medical bills, you will still get the same PIP coverage that you have been paying for all these years, which is you'll get 80% of your medical bills and 60% of your lost wages up to the amount of your personal injury protection coverage, which is usually $10,000 less any deductible that you may have. Now, as far as if you have a permanent impairment, you have no defendant that you can identify to sue. Yet, you have the physical evidence, you have the testimony of eyewitnesses, and you have your own testimony that you were run off the road by a negligent driver. Under any other circumstance, if that driver had been caught, or if that driver had stopped, or if there had been a collision and they couldn't leave, you would have a lawsuit against that operator of that vehicle for negligence if you had a permanent impairment. Since that vehicle's not there, you don't know the name, identity, that's the phantom vehicle. Now, if you have uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage with your vehicle, which is the most important automobile insurance I think that a person can probably carry, you have liability, you get PIP as a part of that. By all means, purchase uninsured motorist coverage. You're entitled to it. They have to offer it to you. If you don't take it, you have to specifically sign a written rejection. And you should carry as much uninsured motorist coverage as you can possibly afford. And it's a very inexpensive portion of your policy. So make certain that you have it. Also, Florida law provides that if you have more than one vehicle insured, you actually get to stack those benefits unless you sign another written form to elect non-stacking. In any event, assuming you have uninsured motorist coverage on your own insurance, you make a claim for the bodily injury that you suffered, a permanent impairment, and you are able to recover damages if you can prove that you were injured as a result of this event, even though the phantom vehicle is not there. You have to prove that the action that occurred was as a result of the phantom vehicle. And, you know, they're difficult cases to prove sometimes, because if you just went to sleep and ran off the road, spun around and hurt yourself, you know, you can't.
Are you protected then?
You can't claim that there was any negligence on the part of a phantom vehicle. There has to be another vehicle, and you have to prove that the action that you took was as a result of the negligent operation of that unknown vehicle. And it's sometimes a difficult element of proof, but you'd be surprised oftentimes, especially if you hire a lawyer or consult with a lawyer immediately after the accident, their investigators can go talk to people. You'd be surprised that you'd go talk to the neighbor who lived across the street.
Yeah.
Maybe he or she was sitting on the front porch
Yeah.
and said, yeah, I saw that blue car pull right out in front of you, and you didn't have any, you're lucky to be alive.
Yeah.
And if you hadn't been on your toes and drove your car into the ditch, you'd have been serious, you know, that sort of thing.
I'd like the advice to call law enforcement, because I can imagine myself, I might just pull away, say, man, I got to go see a doctor. I think I cracked my neck or something like that, and never call police. And meanwhile, not get the evidence you were just talking about, the scuff marks.
Well, it's important to do that. It's obviously important to get emergency medical care, and rather than say I've got to go to the hospital because I might have cracked my neck, I would suggest that the better course would be to call 911 and say, an unknown driver ran me off the road and I'm injured. Please send an ambulance and a EMT.
Yeah, really.
Along with a law enforcement officer.
John is doing the show live today on February 6th. If you would like to call, the number is 622-9622. That's the WOCA Climate Control Source Hotline. And you have somebody on the line, John.
Very good.
Good morning. You're on the air with John Fuller.
Yeah, good morning, John.
Good morning again, sir. How are you?
All fine, thank you. And how are you?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Okay, very good. My situation here is I'm thinking there must be a lot of people that are probably listening to this radio station, this program right now, that got themselves into a large financial situation with the credit cards and car payments, and of course the killer now with property becoming upside down, and all of a sudden here comes the foreclosure action filed against you. Can you explain to us what the bankruptcy chapter like 7 and 13 could do for people in this situation?
I can give you a very superficial general statement about that.
Okay.
Bankruptcy law is one of those areas of the law that has its own set of rules, procedures, case law. It has its own separate judge in the federal judicial system, and it is a highly specialized area.
Oh, okay.
And I always I did this last week even. As soon as I get a case where a person is facing potential need for bankruptcy, even if I'm not sure if they have the need or qualify, I send them to a bankruptcy lawyer for an evaluation.
It's a specialty.
Generally, it is highly specialized, but to generally answer your question, a Chapter 7 is when a debtor is completely insolvent and his debts are in excess of his assets, and there is no reasonable plan in which he could put together to ever repay those debts or a portion of those debts, and the value of his assets are substantially lower than the amount of his debts, and he simply needs to have a clean slate.
Okay.
Bankruptcy files a petition for Chapter 7,
Okay.
and all of the assets that he has goes into the bankruptcy estate, which is administered by a court-appointed bankruptcy trustee. He takes the assets, he marshals them, he sees how much money he can get out of those assets. The creditors have, in bankruptcy, both secured and unsecured, are all given a time frame for filing a claim, and then at the end of the day, the bankruptcy trustee liquidates the assets and parcels out whatever monies there is to the creditors on a pro rata basis, and they get sometimes pennies on the dollar.
Okay.
Chapter 13 is a different type of bankruptcy, and it's when the debts equal or exceed the assets, but the individual or the organization is still functioning and generating an income, and if given an opportunity to keep his assets, he can have a reasonable possibility of doing a Chapter 13 workout plan where the creditors may not get 100% on the dollar, but they'll get 60, 70% or more on the dollar, which is better than getting essentially nothing in Chapter 7. So he is allowed, under the supervision of the bankruptcy court, a certain amount of time to put forth a reorganization plan under Chapter 13.
I see.
Again, there is a court-appointed trustee to monitor these assets and to control these assets to make sure that they are not disposed of, damaged, defaced, dissipated, or what have you. And if he can put together a plan that is approved by the bankruptcy court, he or his organization or she would be given a reasonable amount of time to try to work their way out by making reduced payments on the debts, which at the conclusion of the plan, which has to be approved by the trustee and the creditors, if at the conclusion of that the individual has complied with the Chapter 13 plan, then he gets a clean bill of health and he stays on. Chapter 11 is the same thing for businesses. Chapter 13 is called the wage earner plan. It's for an individual. Chapter 11 does the same thing, only it's for business organizations. There's a lot more to it. I don't handle bankruptcy cases, don't do bankruptcy law, but that's in general how it works.
Okay, excellent. And it looks like you have another phone call. Good morning. You're on the air with John.
Good morning, John.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Is there a different law for mopeds? I know there's a different license, but is it a law for mopeds to be street worthy? Or is it a different law?
I'm going to ask Larry if he can help me understand. Your question did not come through really clear.
Sounds like he's asking if there's a law that requires a moped to be street worthy.
I believe there would be. Any motorized vehicle. Now, the brake horsepower determines the details of that, but there are probably 10,000 laws in the state of Florida when you factor in the Florida Administrative Code, and it's just impossible for anyone to sit here and specifically off the top of their head tell you what a particular law involving something like a moped is. So I would check with the Department of Motor Vehicles, the driver's license place. They would probably be able to answer that phone for you over that question for you over the phone.
If you would like to ask John a question, the phone line is open. It's the WOCA Climate Control Source Hotline, 622-9622. I don't know if this is out of left field, but the other day I was watching a video and this young girl was mouthing off to a judge, and the whole proceeding looks like it was through a closed circuit TV, whatever they call it. You know, he's not. They're not in the same room.
Right.
Does that ever happen? Do trials ever get conducted that way, where the judge is not even, because in her case it looked like she was I don't know what she was there for, but it didn't look like she was actually with a lawyer. It was just her.
What they have in criminal court is you have to go before a committing magistrate within 24 hours of being arrested, and they have a courtroom set up at the courthouse with video lead that's hooked up to the Marion County Judicial Center, and people who are arrested, they are brought before the committing magistrate to determine bail within 24 hours of their arrest, and they will often do that with closed-circuit TV.
I gotcha. Okay.
The trial itself I'm not familiar with any trial being conducted that way.
Because it seems like it would be awkward for you as an attorney to have to work that way. So
it wouldn't work, and I don't see that.
Yeah.
I don't think that would ever happen. But first appearances are handled that way routinely.
And you have another phone call. Good morning. You're on the air with John Fuller.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Very good. I had a question on if you turn a resume into a company for a job application, and you have important documents in there, military documents, your Social Security number and that, and say a year goes by, a year and a half, and they didn't call you, can you go back in and retrieve that back so that you get your personal information back, or is that their personal property now?
Generally speaking, unless you gave a waiver for them to keep that information, I think you could get it back. There's new confidentiality rules that have been adopted in the last year as far as filing anything in court cases, that you have to file a notice of confidentiality, and those sensitive things are redacted or no longer included in the pleadings. With a company, if you submitted the materials, I honestly don't know the specific answer, but I would think that if you ask to retrieve your private information, if it was given for the purpose of an application, you would be entitled to get that back, or to, in some way, if nothing else, you could file an action to require that it be sealed.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
might be something you don't want it to be out there, and for anybody and everybody to
Right.
take a look
Well,
at.
what's happening? The law is really in a state of flux right now, because there is so much information that is in the cyberspace that
Yeah.
once you put something in a public document, it was always a public document, but now people with a computer or a cell phone can go on Google and oftentimes get much easier access to things, and so the courts are just starting to adopt rules to try to protect that.
And you have another phone call. Good morning. You're on the air with John Fuller.
Hey, good morning, John. Good morning,
Good morning.
Larry, thank you for that information. Mr. Fuller, I got hopefully a quick question, and you didn't answer it while I was out of the truck, but back to automobile insurance. I have stacked uninsured motorist. I have an older truck and a motorcycle, but the liability levels, I mean, is there a recommended liability level on insurance? And I'll hang up so I can get your answer, and thanks for the show.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the question. That's a good question. The practical answer is you want to have as much liability insurance as you can reasonably afford, and that is realistic to protect what assets you have. If you have substantial assets and someone sues you and you do not have adequate insurance and they get a large judgment against you, they can go levy on those assets, and they would be at risk. The purpose of insurance is to protect your personal estate in the event somebody gets a judgment against you. So the simple answer is get as much liability insurance as you can afford. Obviously, a practical economic consideration has to be factored into that. You can't not pay your electric bill because you've got $10 million of liability insurance to protect a small home. Well, your home would be protected anyway, but to protect assets that would otherwise not be covered, an automobile, bank account or something like that. One of the interesting things is that the amount of uninsured motorists that you can coverage that you can have, the insurance company has to offer you the same amount of uninsured motorist coverage that you have liability coverage for. So, I urge people to carry as much liability insurance as they can reasonably afford that has a relationship to what assets are at risk. If they have a $500,000 estate of non-exempt assets, I'm not talking about their home, which homestead is exempt, but of non-exempt assets, then ideally they would have a minimum of $500,000 of liability insurance that would protect them. Another thing that you can do that is oftentimes very inexpensive and really gives another layer of protection is you get your basic automobile insurance. Say it's $100,000, $300,000 or $500,000 or whatever. You can purchase an umbrella policy, which is a separate policy, which provides $1 million or more for a relatively small amount of money. That is an excess policy that kicks in when your primary liability policy is exhausted. So if you get sued and someone gets a verdict against you for $1 million and you have $500,000 of automobile insurance, but you have $1 million umbrella policy, then the umbrella policy is excess over that, and they come in when the 500 is exhausted and we cover the rest. So you really need to sit down with a really good insurance professional and look at what programs they have and look at what the cost is and shop around, because different insurance companies have different prices on different types of coverage, and some are more reasonable than others. But you also want to look at the reputation for the company, for how well do they treat their insureds. Do they come in and pay claims promptly? Do they provide good defenses? Is that company one of the well-rated companies that you can call the insurance commissioner of the state of Florida? Or are they some fly-by-night undercapitalized company that is just barely squeaking by the regs?
You don't want that one.
And once they get a bunch of claims against them, like if a hurricane hit or something, they may be insolvent.
Yeah, and we've heard of a few of those stories, haven't we?
Happened.
What a multi-layered show today. Lots of ground covered. What's your phone number?
Our phone number is 352-547-4292. Toll-free number is 855-534-2565. Law firms Fuller and Fuller. If you have a legal problem, if you've been in an accident or have business, commercial, or Social Security issues, we'd be happy to talk with you.
All right. John, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
That's one for a keep. I got to mark that one so that I know in the future when you can't make it here, that one should be repeated. That was a good one.
Well, I appreciate all of our listeners who are kind enough to take time out of their day to call in and ask really good questions.
That's right.
Because this show works on a dialogue. And I appreciate you, Larry, who you're always magnificent to chat with. But we have some really good listeners, and we appreciate all of them.
All right. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
We'll take a little break and be right back.
Okay.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.